Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what is your game this week?
Up first is Laura Shigihara's story of escape, creativity, and loss in the world of Rakuen.
Following that is 2007's Mass Effect, the game that launched the industry's arguably most accomplished trilogy, with an electronic and orchestral score for the space opera to boot. So, Joe, I gotta tell you, after that Katamari episode we had, I went and bought Katamari Damacy Reroll for Switch. Guys, if you haven't yet, it's $30. I mean, I don't know what you're missing out on, but go get that. I can't wait to play it, especially on your recommendation.
That game needs money. They sent that game out to die, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, you put it on the same day of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I mean, that's just crazy.
So, give it money.
All the more recommendations that we can give this show through the soundtracks, that would be certainly welcome indeed. I'm looking forward to having you talk about this game Rakuen, because honestly, I consider myself pretty learned and I follow the industry pretty closely. Never heard of Rakuen, and I'm excited to learn about it, especially with the designer, composer, and real creative force behind it.
Mm-hmm. So, let's jump on into it then. This is very interesting then, because this will be the first time we've had a game where one person's heard of it and the other has not at all. Because we've had games where, like, you've played it, but I haven't, or I've played it, but you haven't. But it's never been, I've played it, but you have no idea what it is.
Yeah, I mean, at least we're aware of it. I mean, we're generally talking about, like, AAA games, but, like, this is an indie effort. And I'm sure I've probably heard of the name before, but it's just like, if I can't visualize what this looks like, what it plays like. So I'm sure many of you listening out there are also in the same boat. So this will be definitely an educational experience for us. And it's definitely why I wanted to put it first in this week's episode.
So Rakuen was a game released on May 10th, 2017 on PC, and as far as I know, there might be plans to bring it to other systems, but I have not really heard of anything big. It was developed on the RPG Maker XP engine by one Laura Shigihara.
Yay!
Now, if you haven't heard of Laura Shigihara, I'll get into her in a bit, because she's super cool, and she's going to be the focus of most of this. It was mainly developed by her specifically. Pretty much everything except for the art, seemingly, and other people gave feedback, and the art was mainly done by Emi Toyonaga, with Matt Holmberg and Stephen Davis also appearing in the credits for art. But from the sound of it, by reading the interviews and such that she has done about the game, it was mostly Emi Toyonaga that did a lot of the art for the game. It is a game about a kid that is in the hospital. Seemingly, it never explains exactly why he's in the hospital, but it is explained that he is probably dying. And his mom, who is helping him escape the pain and mundanity of being in the hospital as a child by helping him escape to the imaginary land of Rakuen, where he must awaken the guardian of the forest, Morizora, in order to get a wish granted. And in order to wake up the guardian of the forest, he has to help the imaginary world counterparts of the other patients in the hospital with their various problems and help them sort of tie up their personal stories to get pieces of a song called Mori no Kokoro. It's a very interesting, nice little game. There is zero combat. If you've played games like To the Moon or something like that, it's like that with a bit more of a fantasy setting, even if all the fantasy is just supposed to be imagination.
It's interesting you reference To the Moon because I'm sure like others out there, To the Moon was where I first heard of Laura Shigihara, and and how she provided vocals to some tracks in that game. And again, it won't be the last time we reference a game like To the Moon. I'm sure it will get its own episode. But
oh boy, will it.
That's where I've heard of her, and it looks like she's done more work, which is always great to see.
So it was lauded for its narrative and its personality and appearance and all that. And reminder, this game came out in 2017, and a lot of publications put it as like some of the best games released in 2017. And I'm going to remind you, 2017 saw Resident Evil 7, Breath of the Wild, Nier Automata, like some big heavy hitters came out in 2017.
Persona 5, Super Mario Odyssey.
So much stuff. Like 2017 was a wild year for video games. And you've got this little indie game made on RPG Maker showing up on lists of some of the best games of the year. And that's just super impressive on its own. Originally, it was supposed to come out in 2014. That was their goal. And it was originally just supposed to be a music video for a song that Shigihara had already written. But once she saw some of Toyonaga's art, she was just like, what if we tried to make a game? And then an entire game evolved out of that. So let's talk about Shigihara herself. So she is half Japanese. She was born to a French mother and a Japanese father. I couldn't find where or when, which probably means she either has never like said that information out loud or doesn't want that information out, which fair. She grew up between the US and Japan. And so, like, she's fluent in Japanese and stuff. Half of her family lives there, yada, yada, yada. And as seems to be the case with most of the people we talk about on this show, she really just loved video game music from a young age. And she really, really specifically became fascinated with how, something we've talked about in the past, how older composers for stuff like the NES and the SNES and all that worked around the technical limitations of the console in order to make really good music. Because that was a big part of composing back then. You didn't have the most sophisticated sound chip. You had the NES, which could do about 3 tones at a time and no more.
Yeah, I've always heard it's like 3 or 4 tracks, basically, yeah.
So they had to get really creative, and so she really took to that. Specifically, she cites Mega Man music, specifically said Gravity Man from Mega Man 5 was a big influence for her.
Yeah.
And also, when it came to writing her own songs, she cited Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI as being the games whose stories kind of led her to be like, I want to write music about these stories. And she does. She actually doesn't just do video game composing. She's got a YouTube channel called Super Shigi, where she currently has, I have down here, nearly 123,000 subscribers.
Good for her. That's awesome.
She just publishes her video game covers. She publishes original songs, whether they be based on video games or not. She posts vlogs. She posts soundtrack bits that she personally worked on. For instance, the entire Rakuen soundtrack is actually on her YouTube channel, personally. And so she's been doing that since 2009. Yeah, November 2009 is when she started doing that. But her first major game was Plants vs. Zombies. And I didn't know that. She composed all of the music for Plants vs. Zombies. And is even the vocalist on the song Zombies on Your Lawn.
Oh, okay.
And I believe she also sings the Japanese vocals for that song as well.
I mean, that would make sense, yeah.
That would make sense. If she could speak Japanese, she could probably sing in it too, I would assume. She's also the voice of the Singing Sunflower, which led to her becoming a voice in World of Warcraft, because the Singing Sunflower became a pet in World of Warcraft. Something I didn't know because I've never played WoW, but on her YouTube bio, it says that she has done sound, music, or voice work for around 25 different games. But I could not find an exact list. In fact, her Wikipedia article is kind of worthless.
Aww.
or at least that section of it, the discography section of it, because it doesn't list what she's specifically what she's worked on. It says notable works from her include, and then lists specific songs, including one specific song from Rakuen, the game she did all of the composing for, but then also just lists Plants vs. Zombies by itself. And so I could not find a very good list of all the stuff she has worked on, but some of her notable works are, again, Plants vs. Zombies. She works with Freebird Games a lot, having written and performed Everything's All Right in their game To the Moon and Wish My Life Away in their game Finding Paradise, both of which are very good games that both will end up on this show at some point, believe you me.
Yep.
She contributed to the new soundtrack for Super Meat Boy on PS4, Wii U, Switch, and Vita, because that game had to get a different soundtrack when it released on those platforms, for reasons that we'll get into another day. And also apparently made another original game called Melaloon, which I had never heard of before doing research for this story.
That is another one that's news to me, for sure, yeah.
And she also she contributed to the Deltarune soundtrack, which was Toby Fox's latest game. I believe she composed and performed in the credits song, the ending song. And the last thing, of course, I liked this little tidbit. She is well known for vocals, obviously, as should be obvious at this point. And I think one of the interviewers asked her, well, I mean, have you ever thought about doing vocals like professionally? Like making an album on your own? And she said that she actually got offers when she was in college in Japan because her friends sent record companies samples of her work without telling her. And they offered to have her record an album. And she turned it down because she wanted to finish college. And she had some other personal reasons for doing so. And to be honest, very glad she did. We probably wouldn't have gotten any of her video game work if she had gone into that section. So
that's so interesting.
So that's about all I've got on information about Laura Shigihara. I couldn't find a lot, surprisingly, which is unfortunate. She does not work at PopCap anymore, I believe. Do I have when she left? I don't have the exact year that she left. She composed one song in Plants vs. Zombies 2 and then proceeded to leave the company. After George Fahn, the creator of Plants vs. Zombies, was laid off along with a bunch of other employees. Fahn is actually who brought her into PopCap to work on Plants vs. Zombies in the first place. So I assume that with him gone, she didn't really have a lot of reason to stick around. So she walked. And now she mainly seems to do freelance stuff and her own stuff, which is good. I think that's a good place for her to be. She seems to be doing great in that area. So good for her.
Yeah, she's amazing. Plain and simple.
So Rakuen itself was in development for 4 years. Like I said, it was originally meant to come out in 2014. That did not work out. Didn't come out until 2017. And I don't have any other information on the development. I tried. I looked. I couldn't find anything. So let's just get into the 5 critical tracks. I don't have a lot of information. I apologize. But when it's an indie game like this, especially when it's one person who has a bunch of her fingers in a bunch of other pies, it's kind of hard to find information specifically on that game, I guess.
And when it's a game that dedicated game enthusiasts don't hear a whole lot about.
That too. There's just not a lot of info. I only knew about this game because I followed Laura Shigihara on Twitter because of her work in To the Moon. That's the whole reason that I even knew the game happened. So hopefully this turns some other people onto it. I believe it's about $10, $15 on Steam. It's worth it. It's not, I don't think gameplay wise it'll blow you away, but it's a worthwhile game for people like you and me that really enjoy narrative games and stuff like that.
Definitely.
So, our first track is called The Keepers. It is the title track of the game, and it's the first sort of experience in the game you have with Laura doing vocals. And it's just this really sort of mysterious sounding choir of Laura voices. I assume all the voices are Laura. I think that's a safe assumption.
Probably. And it sounds like Japanese.
I believe it is supposed to be Japanese.
Yeah.
The game does take place in Japan, so there's
Okay,
a lot of Japanese influence on Rakuen. I believe Rakuen means paradise, if I remember correctly.
Sounds about right.
From what I was looking into. Because there is, I think, another game called Rakuen somewhere, but I couldn't find any info on it. It doesn't even have a Wikipedia article.
Well, then it's not good enough, damn it. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, that's probably true, to be honest.
I don't want to slander anyone's work. No.
I guess there are shovelware games with Wikipedia. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth there. But like this song, I think is important to highlight first because it's the first song you hear and it sets the tone. And speaking of setting the tone, next you have Kami Kabuto Hero. And this is a slow, sort of melancholy song, because obviously this game has some sad, melancholy parts to it. It's about a kid in the hospital. That ain't a happy subject. You can't assume it's going to be, and nobody would. So, this song plays in a couple of very key moments, and it's just really striking. And it's one of the more memorable songs in the game.
I really liked the clean plucked strings on it. And it made me think like if it were a real recording or if it was done with like really good MIDI instrument work. Because it didn't seem to have like much reverb on it. But then if it was like a ukulele, which, you know, has like that shorter string length, then it wouldn't ring out as longer compared to like a guitar string. I don't know. It got me thinking about it, but I really liked the just really clean play on it.
It sounds like MIDI to me, but MIDI nowadays, some of it is getting so good that it's indistinguishable from live instruments. So it's really hard to say for sure. So I don't know. That would be a question for Laura Shigihara. Laura, please let me talk to you. That would be cool. I want to interview you. That'd be rad. She's not watching this video. If you are, comment, because you're cool and we like you. The next song is my personal favorite non-vocal song in the game. It is called Welcome to the Forest. As a complete 180 from Kami Kabuto Hero, this is like, because while the game does have a bit of a melancholic tone to it, it's about a kid like retreating into their imagination and going into this fantastical land full of strange creatures and happy villages and stuff like that. So obviously, like, the game is not a downer from start to finish, and it's very important to highlight the big parts of that. And this song is so good and so catchy. And when I heard this song for the first time, I think when I bought the soundtrack, this was one of the first songs I went looking for. Because it's so fun. It's fun. And there are bits in it that are they're the first bits of a song that's later on this list that you hear in the game, which is just so catchy and it fits in so well I think it starts out maybe a little generic, just slightly, with the string part, but then just really grows into its own. And I don't know. This song is fantastic, and I love it dearly.
It definitely has a lot of positive energy. When I first heard it, and comparing your notes, it made me think, well, yeah, clearly Chrono Trigger is an influence, because this sounds very much like a Chrono Trigger song.
You can absolutely hear some Chrono Trigger stuff in this. Some of the, it reminds me of the Fair music.
Yes, definitely Millennium Fair-like.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that until you just now brought it up. That's a very good point. So you can definitely hear that influence in there.
And that's not a bad thing. I mean...
Oh, not at all.
Gotta borrow from the best, right? But it's definitely reminiscent of that, and it's a good thing to... When you're going away to a town that's on your journey, has that sort of feel, yeah, for sure.
It's just a nice, happy, good song. And now let's bring it back down.
Whee!
For the next song, Build a Little World with Me.
And if you stay right by my side, we'll make it through the night, and you'll never have to feel alone again. So before it's time to leave, would you build a little world with me?
Laura actually cites this as one of her favorite songs that she has ever composed, or at least that's what it seemed to be implying during the interview that I pulled this information from. Boy, I hope I'm right about that, because that's a claim to make. This song plays during, for those of you who have played To the Moon, it plays during what I would consider the everything's all right moment.
Okay.
Where it's a montage of things happening and characters doing stuff together. And it's just a really sweet, charming scene that has a very sort of sad overtone to it.
Yeah, the chords of the vocals are just hauntingly beautiful. It's extremely well done, but you listen, it's chilling, not in a scary way, but it's so well recorded and so on pitch with those harmonies.
She says that when she wrote these lyrics, she was thinking of her best friend. She doesn't elaborate on that, so I hope her best friend's okay.
God, it kind of reminds me of that Lonely Rolling Star piece from Katamari.
Little
Jesus.
bit, but I hope her friend's okay.
I hope so too.
She doesn't expand upon that at all, so I'm going to assume she is, or they are, or he is. I don't know. She just said her best friend. I know nothing about this person. And it also sort of ties into the character that it's about is supposed to be singing this song, I think. It's another patient in the hospital who collects marbles. And at the beginning, she loses a bunch of her marbles. You can find the marbles around the hospital during the game, or around the world of Rakuen and stuff like that. And you can take them back to her, and she'll be like, oh, it's this. Because you slowly learn that she has a very active imagination because she didn't have any friends when she wasn't in the hospital. And the way she sees these marbles is she sees them as little planets. They're their own little planets. Each one has its own story that she will tell you. She'll tell you about the planet when you give it back to her. And so when it says build a little world with me, it's sort of like mixing into this theme that has been building all game about these little worlds that she keeps with herself. And she finally has a friend. And it's a really good moment in the game. And the song is incredible.
It is a great song. When you said losing her marbles, it almost made me think, is that supposed to be a metaphor for something, or is it just physical? But that's really interesting. Planets in marbles makes you think of Men in Black. So you're pulling on a lot of interesting threads there, but it sounds touching. I mean, the music is just gorgeous, and Man, whenever she sings, like, it's when you just gotta pay attention to the song for sure.
And the last song is Jump.
If we jump into the water, would we swim or would we drown? If we build a set of wings, then could we fly or just fall down? And if you keep talking to me through this darkness, through this night, I'll be alright.
This song has the most information about it, and there's a very good reason for that. It was not written for this game, but it was basically the basis on which the entire game's story was built. So this song was actually written in 2011 because Tohoku in Japan was hit by an earthquake, a big one. And a lot of people were hurt or homeless and needed help. And so Akira Yamaoka, who is absolutely a composer we will be talking about,
A legend.
at some point,
Yep.
because if you think I ain't bringing Silent Hill to this show, listener, you are heavily mistaken. He got a bunch of composers together, including Hip Tanaka, Koji Kondo, Nobuo Uematsu, and Bear McCreary.
Nice.
Which I found really interesting and really funny when I read that. And Laura Shigihara, who at the time was credited specifically as the Plants vs. Zombies composer. And he got them all together and said, let's make an album. And all of the sort of proceeds of this album are going to go towards earthquake relief. And Shigihara looked at the song Jump that she had written, but she had not recorded, and said, yeah, this would probably work really well for that. And so it's on that album. You could have heard this song as early as 2011. And this was the song that was originally supposed to just be, Rakuen was supposed to be a music video for. And then they decided to turn it into a game. And now it's the credit song for that game because she basically said the whole story of the game was inspired by two things. One being the actions of people around the world and in Japan after that earthquake, and two being this song. So without Akira Yamaoka, we might not have this game or this music. So thank you, Akira Yamaoka.
Yeah, this is just gorgeous. I could listen to this all day.
It is a fantastic song with just a great message. And there's not really much else to say about that. I found it really interesting that this was the first one that was written, and it's the last song you hear in the game. So for final thoughts, I have two songs on the cutting room floor. First one being These Gray Walls. Which is just the song that plays when you're walking around the hospital. It's just this very calm sort of piano piece with some strings behind it. And there's not much to it, but it does its job very well, and I think that's worth highlighting.
And it's important to set up the setting for the game, for sure.
And then one of my favorite songs, but one I could not really justify putting on the list. It's actually my favorite vocal song in the game, but it's also only a minute long. Walking Through the Night.
Close your eyes, I am here, and everything will be alright. I am right here by your side as we go walking through the night.
Which happens at probably the best scene in the entire game. And is just a really nice, beautiful, short lullaby. Sort of. That just has it hits you like a ton of bricks when you're playing the game. So I needed to highlight that.
Perfect lullaby. So good.
So, what'll I never forget about the game? Well, honestly, it's going to be the messages and themes of the game, and I actually have a quote from Shigihara herself. She was asked during an interview, what would you most like to see players take away from the experience of Rakuen? And obviously that's basically what this question is what did you take away from it that'll never leave you? And her answer is that no matter who you are, you have worth and meaning. You don't have to do something big to be a hero. Sometimes doing something as simple as listening and empathizing can change a person's whole life for the better. It's never too late, whether you have 80 more years or 8 more days, you have time. And that's just a very, very nice quote, and I think that's a very good way of looking at life, is that it costs nothing to help somebody, to be nice to somebody. You could be improving their life in ways you don't even know.
Man, Laura Shigihara is the coolest. Like, I've had a whole lot of respect for her because of just how talented of a musician she was with piano and vocals and all that before. But now, like, she put in all this work and has all these good messages behind it. Yeah, big ups.
She's a cool person. We will definitely be talking about her at other points when we talk about other games that she's been involved in the past. This will not be the last time she comes up in the show. And if somehow this does get back to Laura Shigihara, you're cool. We like you. For my transition to highlight a fan cover or remix of a song, it's actually kind of hard to find something. Which shouldn't surprise anybody, since like this is a smaller scale game, which if you have never heard of this game, by the way, go give it a shot. Like I said, it's like $10, $15. It's definitely worth your time. You'll beat it in it's like 4 or 5 hours long. It's not a long game at all. But I want to showcase a cover of These Gray Walls, which is described as an ambient guitar cover / remix by String Player Gamer. This actually, I learned about him because Laura herself highlighted him. She linked to him on one of her YouTube videos, so that's pretty cool. All right, what you got? Tell me about space.
Well, see, I don't know if I can follow that up. I mean, well, thank you first of all for teaching us about that. It's a game now I want to go play and hear more of that music. Absolutely. But here I am to dive back into the AAA game space, and we're going to talk about Mass Effect. And we're not talking the series as a whole. We're specifically talking about the first game in the series from 2007. For those that do not know what Mass Effect is, it is a third-person action RPG where choices that the player makes as the central character of Commander Shepard, those choices have consequences, and they carry over to the game's second and third installments. So it's a game that was originally and always planned as a trilogy, where these choices carried over.
And this was a novel concept at the time. This had not really been a thing that had been done ever.
It takes a lot of planning and a lot of strategy and a lot of, computer power to kind of carry this and see it all through. The gist of the first Mass Effect game, as far as the story goes, it's basically when you have one of the galaxy's most powerful special ops agents, he decides to go rogue. And so you as Commander Shepard must recruit a crew of people from all across space, humans and aliens alike, to go after this rogue agent, as well as discover the evil underlying large existential threat that could doom the entire galaxy. This was developed by BioWare, and this is particularly the team that was responsible for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
That track.
So, I mean, makes a lot of sense with their dialogue wheels and all, and the action that's involved. Particularly the director Casey Hudson is the lead, who was the lead on the Mass Effect trilogy. Really interesting individual if we were ever to talk about game developers and all. He's now back at BioWare to lead that studio through Anthem, and it's particularly where we're talking about Mass Effect today, because Anthem is on the verge of releasing as of this episode coming out. So yeah, it's interesting to see him back there, and they're figuring out if they want to do anything with the Mass Effect franchise going forward. As far as other things about the game and how it's was received then and now, I found it interesting that, the Drew Karpyshyn is always tied to being the writing lead on the project. But according to the research that I saw, apparently each primary planet in the game's story had its own head writer. And so you did a lot of the work, but then they had to collaborate with everyone else, and especially with Drew, to make sure that everything was consistent across this world and universe that they're trying to build. So apparently the script ended up being about 400,000 words and about 20,000 lines of spoken dialogue. They say that's about 20 movies or about 4 to 5 full-length novels when you're talking about just heft and script length.
Looking at that, those are big numbers, and it's hard to wrap your head. And then you look at Mass Effect, you're like, of course it's that long. It's not gonna. Have you seen how much dialogue's in that game and how big that game is? But at the same time, you look at 400, the number 400K. That's a lot of. I don't think I've written that many words in my life.
Not only that, that's 2007. You think about games now and how big they are. It's just mind-blowing how it's probably only gone up from there.
Yeah, that's a lot of writing.
Many people forget that this was originally released on Xbox 360 as a 360 exclusive on November 20th, 2007, because it was published, or at least co-published along with EA, by Microsoft Studios. It got moved over to PC, or Games for Windows Live, in 2008, and then eventually made its way to PS3 in 2012 when it was part of the Mass Effect trilogy there.
I played it.
Yeah, I remember playing Mass Effect in 2007. I was at college and I was playing on a 13-inch screen in my bedroom and just enraptured. And oh yeah, those subtitles were real hard to read. But
that era.
Man, definitely good times there. As far as how it was considered at the time, there's that good old controversy that is stirred up from Mass Effect. And I found this part of the research particularly fascinating in how it was summarized. So do indulge me here, as when you develop close partnerships with certain members of your crew, you may choose to romance them. And when you decide to do so, there's a small cutscene that plays where you see some slight nudity. It's very brief and all that, but according to the people at the time who are particularly conservative, and this is in 2007, again, to see how some things change and some things don't, it started off with a neoconservative blogger named Kevin McCullough, who first brought this scene under scrutiny, where he employed statements such as, quote, "Mass Effect can be customized to sodomize whatever, whomever, however the game player wishes." And quote, "With its over-the-net capabilities, virtual orgasmic rape is just the push of a button away."
Somebody got a hold of a thesaurus.
Yeah, and so a lot of people were kind of dogging that, and I guess he kind of backed away from all that, and okay, fine. But what everyone really remembers, again, if you were old enough to be alive and aware of games at the time, was a Fox News segment with Martha McCallum as the kind of guest on the show, and she was also discussing the sexual content of the game. McCallum stated that the game, quote, "leaves nothing to the imagination," and features the ability for players to, quote, "engage in full graphic sex." There was the self-proclaimed psychology specialist Cooper Lawrence on, and he was talking about how, oh, well, teens think that they can just win their way to a woman's heart with sex and the kind of arguments that you'd expect in there. And also, one video game journalist, Jeff Keighley, was also interviewed. Keighley did the Real Heroes work, of course, and focused on challenging the accuracy of the statements, asking her if she had ever actually played the game, which of course she responded, no.
That clip was like the first thing I saw about Mass Effect.
Yeah, and what a way to introduce yourself to it, right? It's, oh, what's this sexy game where it's just like, it's a minute out of a 15, 20 hour adventure.
I mean, the Jeff Keighley clip of him asking, have you played the game? And her going, no. Like, why would I have? You're doing a story on it. That's why you would have.
But still, I mean, it's your first exposure to it through that. Like that, even still. So then Cooper Lawrence, who is a woman, by the way, with her, the self-proclaimed psychology specialist, eventually watched someone play the game. And so probably for about 2.5 hours or so, she retracted her statements, then noting that she had been told the game was similar to pornography. But then when she watched the scene, she said, this is a very 2007 thing to say, noting that, quote, she has seen episodes of Lost that are more sexually explicit.
Man, remember Lost?
Yeah.
I didn't watch that show.
But while she was doing all of this, her book that she was promoting as a psychology specialist was on Amazon.com. And people, especially in the offended gaming community, were going to review the book and rating it 1 star out of 5. Many of the reviews, of course, satirically noted that they had not actually read her book, but had heard from someone that the book was bad and thus voted it low. So, it was quite the controversy at the time for something that, if you go and play it in context, is like really not that bad. But this was almost 12 years ago. But overall, I mean, Mass Effect is one of gaming's greatest trilogies, and it's for what it accomplished with carrying choices over through all the games. It's just remarkable. But many see the original Mass Effect as the weak link, so to speak, because the gameplay just drastically changed for the second and third installments. Those kind of became more cover shooters with RPG sort of casting abilities, whereas the combat was more RPG rooted and numbers driven in the first one. You can definitely tell the big leap in gameplay between the first compared to the second and third.
And a lot of it was just, some of it was trend chasing, obviously. Like Gears of War had just happened, and so cover shooting was big, but also like some of it was just, a lot of Mass Effect 1's design is kind of broken, so they had to like fix some stuff. So I don't blame them for changing stuff up.
It's still very rooted in kind of that Knights of the Old Republic mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about the music, though. Mass Effect, the first one especially, has a very interesting soundtrack where 4 composers contributed to it. You have Jack Wall, Sam Hulick, Richard Jacques, and David Cates. So we'll talk about Jack Wall, because not only is he listed first, he's kind of the more well-known out of all of these 4, although all 4 are very talented. But when you're listed higher, or listed first, you generally contribute more to a work of art. So let's talk about Jack Wall. Born in 1964 in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. No word on he loved music from a young age and he always wanted to do music. Instead, he went to Drexel University in Philadelphia and earned a degree in civil engineering, where his first job coming out of school was, as he said, quote, planning out subdivisions and shopping malls.
That's 2 composers in a row that you've brought to the table that have degrees in things that aren't music. You're planning this.
Yeah, and then they're like, nope, don't want to do that, because Jack Wall apparently was part of a rock band. And after recording a demo tape with his rock band, he was inspired to change his career path and get a job in the music industry. Just leave that civil engineering life behind go work in recording studios part-time while he also worked as a bartender, moved around to different cities. I mean, Philadelphia and Washington. And eventually, when he lived in LA and he was married, his wife knew someone who was starting up the game company Post-Linear Entertainment. And they're, developing PC games. And the guy who founded this company asked Wall to work for the company as a composer. So he got his composing start writing video games. So he eventually has done stuff for TV and, Netflix and things like that. But, primarily a lot of his work has been in video games. So the first game he got to work on was Vigilance. That was in 1997. Don't worry, I haven't heard of it either.
Yeah, it's not ringing a bell.
But eventually he joined forces with fellow composer Tommy Tallarico, who is well known for composing the Earthworm Jim soundtracks, among others, to produce the Video Games Live concert series. They had their first concert in 2005. I guess it's known in the Guinness Book of World Records as like the longest international running concert tour. And it's all about video game music. And Jack Wall was the first conductor for that international tour. So he helped establish it with Tommy Tallarico. I got to see Video Games Live when I was in London a few months ago as of this recording. It was right around Halloween, so it was a special themed episode for horror soundtracks. They started with Castlevania. They did some Silent Hill 2, BioShock. It was really, really good stuff. And if you've never been, it's an amazing experience where they're playing these classic video game songs with a live orchestra, and then on a big projector screen behind them, they're playing matching footage from the game. And so if you're big into game soundtracks, like I am, like you are, Joe, and when they're playing songs you're I know every song, it's just it's the coolest thing to hear live. Absolutely.
I got tickets to a Video Games Live concert one year for my birthday, and they had to cancel the concert because not enough people bought tickets. So I didn't actually get to go see that show.
Oh,
but
man.
I did have tickets to one at some point. It was a huge bummer.
That's really unfortunate. Yeah, and then I'm just thinking back on that show, and we got to meet someone who was in line, and she was from the United States, but was studying, in Oxford or something like that. Was studying in London, and she was in in music composition, and she worked on Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, which is this indie game. And it was just the weirdest connection to make. So I don't know. Yeah, that was a good time. It was a good show with good friends, but it was just interesting to now be talking about Jack Wall, and he helped establish that with Tommy. And Tommy Tallarico still goes around, and he's there and being the face man, essentially being front and center. And they take around different composers and kind of more of a local orchestra, the different places that they go. Still running, which is just remarkable.
And I want to say they started the trend of the Zelda Symphony and the Final Fantasy symphonies and all that sort of stuff. I want to say Video Games Live probably started that trend.
Absolutely. I would say that's a very astute assumption as well. So Jack Wall has worked on many games, particularly, the Mass Effect series. The first and second Mass Effects. He was not on the third game because he eventually went and worked on the Call of Duty Black Ops series, particularly the second, third, and his most recent game is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Also worked on the soundtrack for Dota 2 from Valve there. Among his earlier games were Myst 3 Exile and Myst 4 Revelation. Also worked on Capcom's Lost Planet 3. Rest in peace, Lawbreakers.
Rest in peace as hard as you possibly could.
And then eventually ventured into TV, as I mentioned. He worked on the CW show Rain and also on the Freeform show Shadowhunters. But gaming is the original passion there. So for the Mass Effect soundtrack, Wall was selected primarily as the lead for the soundtrack team because of his work on BioWare's 2005 game Jade Empire. And overall, his familiarity with a wide range of musical styles helped him get selected to continue working for BioWare there. The main vision for Mass Effect, especially from creative director Casey Hudson, was to marry the electronic instrument palette of the late 70s and early 80s with more organic elements. And so overall, this team of 4 composers contributed greatly, as we'll see from this list of games that I've picked out. It's not all Jack Wall. You know, it's certain composers helped here. One helped, just did this song all on his own. It was Sam Hulick who came in to kind of help develop the electronic sound of the soundtrack, because it was a style that, ironically enough, Jack Wall had never worked on before. So they were primarily the big team driving the overall sound, kind of taking electronics and building it on that classic orchestral foundation. But then as the game kind of was starting to meet its deadlines, they brought in Richard Jacques and David Cates near the end of development to finish the score on time. So they definitely helped with some songs as well. Interesting note in the Wikipedia article that says, while a total of 110 minutes of music was written for the game, all the in-game and cinematic music was crafted as multiple stems. So there's just multiple versions, certain instruments drop out here, certain instruments drop out here, to maximize the use and variety in the game. So when it's a long game, less than 2 hours of music might not cover the entire experience. So just slight different variations there. So let's get to the 5 critical tracks, and we're going to start with the very first song you hear in the game, and that's Mass Effect theme. This one was composed with Jack Wall and Sam Hulick. That build of instruments to the big hit is just, I don't want to say legendary, but it's really definitive for this game, because it's the very first cutscene that establishes the entire story, really, or at least the basic foundations of it, because you've gone through your character creator, you've created your Commander Shepard and all the different quirks about the personality, and you have the characters of Udina and Anderson are discussing, Shepard's done this. He's a great leader, and this is what makes him or her special. But then it leads to white text on a black screen, and it's talking about how humanity discovered this ancient space technology that caused amazing advancements. And the civilizations of the galaxy call it Mass Effect. And it's the big hit is when it's the title splash there, and it's building up to this big moment. It's fantastic. And then it goes and introduces the spaceship of the Normandy, and you see your character of Shepard kind of moving through it, and then it's transported throughout the galaxy using one of these machines called mass relays, where it takes the energy and kind of just blasts you, almost like a warp drive kind of thing. It's a great sequence, and this Mass Effect theme really drives through it, primarily with the orchestration, but that kind of electronic build to it is just fantastic.
I don't have much to add on that. It's very good, and I do agree that it's the build up pretty much, 100%.
How have I not asked you yet? Did you ever play the original Mass Effect?
I have. I've played all 3 of them, but it's been a few years.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, I think I played the first Mass Effect. Would have been 2013, 2014.
If you got the trilogy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, because I found the trilogy for cheap and ended up playing all 3 within the span of a couple of years. So it's been a little while, so I'm a little rusty on some of this stuff, so I apologize. But I have played it, yes.
Okay, all right. Good to know. I just forgot to ask. It's probably an important thing to make sure on. The second critical track, we're going to go with Uncharted Worlds.
Now this song I remember, and this song I like a lot.
I mean, it's a great song. This one is only done by credit to Sam Hulick. This is the Galaxy Map exploration theme, and it's so good with its layered synthesizers that it's used in all three games. It's where you're taking the helm of the ship and you're looking at your map across the whole galaxy, and it's like, all right, where should we go to next? And it's a peaceful, lulling sort of melody.
Kind of atmospheric almost.
Yeah. But it's one of those songs that it's just iconic when it comes to the Mass Effect series. And it's a shame they never really brought it through to Andromeda as far as I can recall. But then again, it's been a couple years since that one. That one didn't stand out as much. Go figure.
Who could have guessed? Before even playing Mass Effect, I think one of the first things I heard about was like the Galaxy Map music is just really good. And so I concur, especially I did when loading up the Galaxy Map for the first time. I was like, oh, this is what people were talking about. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's one of those songs that even like 3 years later, 4 years, 5, it's been 6. Oh man, it's been a long time. Even 6 years later, I still remember it pretty fully.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. The third critical track, The Citadel. Oof, I mean, this one is Jack Wall, it's Richard Jacques, and it's Sam Hulick. This is where you are approaching the Citadel for the first time, which is this big sort of cityscape world where all of the cultures throughout the galaxy kind of gather as like a home base in a way. And it's like this big ship in a way where this city landscape is, but it's so massive in scale that when the music sort of reveals the city, it oozes epicness. And I will always think of the falling flutes, right? Like you're just seeing the grand scale of what's uncovered. It's a remarkable moment in the game, very early on. But it's also just the score really emphasizes the experience and just shows the power of that music.
Yeah, like even re-listening to it right now while recording, this will be the second time I've listened to it today, basically. I agree that like the falling flutes, that's the main thing. And like just some of the string swells in the background are really, really cool. And I do remember this moment, I think. Because, like, it's kind of hard to, like you said, it's kind of hard to forget, like, seeing the Citadel for the first time. Because the Citadel's a really cool location, just in general. So, like, just this sort of neutral ground for a bunch of aliens. And in some places, it's the only place you see those aliens. So,
right.
It's just a memorable location in general. So, yeah, this music fits it pretty well.
The number 4 critical track, we're going to go with Sovereign's theme. This is another one that Sam Hulick is the only credited composer for. It's a short track, but it's when Shepard is coming face to face, so to speak, with the true big bad of the game. Sovereign is a Reaper. Again, the game's been out for 12 years. Go play Mass Effect. Like we're not really spoiling anything huge, but like you've had your time. So Sovereign is this Reaper entity, and this is back when Reapers were still this mysterious force until they kind of had some of the mystery taken away in some of the later games. But this deep mechanical voice is rumbling through your TV speakers and is so ominous. And when the strings and choir swells here, it is like the definition of just evil. Just a bad dude that you don't want to be messing with.
This is an intimidating piece.
Mm-hmm. And it really just goes to show, we try to talk about like what are like, it's like the iconic tracks and, you know, ones that really define what the range of the soundtrack is. I mean, we have these great electronic pieces and good use of orchestra, but this is just like that dark side of it.
Very, very much. That's an apt description.
So the fifth critical track then has to be Vigil. Now, this is one that Jack Wall is the only composer on, so I think it's fitting there. This is the first song you hear on the title screen of the game, and it's sort of it's not like the main theme, because obviously Mass Effect theme is like the main theme, right? But it's a very important track for this game, not only because it's the first thing you hear when you boot the game, but it plays at an important part where you're discovering this lost civilization AI that's really critical to the end game. And it's this simple, like starts with a note and then it just builds into simple chords, melodies with these sort of synth horns in a way. And these harmonies grow and swell, and it's a very simplistic song at first, but then eventually grows into something a little bit bigger.
It kind of reminds me like the feeling we talked about in Wind Waker, how like the ocean song, it's just adventure. It's adventure on the high seas.
Yes.
And this is sort of just like you're looking out at the emptiness of space.
Yeah, the wonder of space. That's a good way of describing it. This song will always remind me of the song Kono Yo no Uta from the anime Black Cat. So yeah, I don't know. I just always think of like the chord note progression there. I always think of that. I don't know why. It's just something I always think of. So tracks that are on the cutting room floor for me, it was very, very difficult to leave this one off. But because it's done by a rock band and it's not the main composing team and it's the end credits theme, I had to put M4 Part 2 off the list. Which breaks my heart to do so, because once again, for the third week in a row, if we're talking about greatest video game end credit themes, this is very, very near the top for me. Like, I love this song, but it's not really reflective of what the rest of the soundtrack is, and it's so radically different that it was hard to put it in the 5.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't really seem like it's the same sort of situation as when we were talking about Kingdom Hearts, and it was like, well, you have to talk about Utada Hikaru though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the first thing you hear in the game. She wrote the main theme of the game,
right,
and like this isn't that sort of situation. So I see where you're coming from.
But yeah, shout outs to Fonts. This song is incredible, and I love it so much. And then I had to also, on the cutting room floor for consideration, I gotta put the love theme. If we're talking about that controversy, you might as well put the piano track with that heartbeat, that song that went along with the scene that caused so much ire. It's a good track. It's probably actually one of the best romance tracks in the whole series. But it's important to consider there, even if it wasn't in the 5. So oddly enough, I think what I'll never forget about the game is like the characters. The characters and the crew are really important aspects of all Mass Effect games, really. And then it's like the choices that come along with it. Do you pick Ashley or Kaidan? Like, what happens with Rex? And, Garrus is awesome. And Tali. And it's such just a memorable group. And God, Liara. Liara is bae throughout the whole trilogy. Canon.
Sorry, I'm a Tali man. Sorry.
Canon confirmed Liara. No, it's just a fantastic experience. I'll never forget the trilogy. I doubt it'll be the last time that Mass Effect in general will be brought up, because Mass Effect 2 is probably in my top 5 of all time. So like, it's really hard for me to just say like, we got to start with the first one, and it's a really good soundtrack, because 2 is just, it blows it out of the water for me personally. But it's still a game I will never forget.
Sometimes that's a hard sort of balance to keep, where like, just in general, just to give people a peek behind the curtain, every week I'm like, do I want to do like a regular game that I like the soundtrack for, or do I want to do one of my favorites? And if I have to hold myself back from being like, I want to do my favorites, because if I do that every week, I'll be out of games in about 5 weeks. So it's a balance. It's a balance that I've found is surprisingly challenging to keep, but we do it nonetheless.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that'll about do it for this week. Really interesting selections this week. I'm really happy to learn about Rakuen. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I hope everyone will go out and buy the game and support Laura Shigihara there. Thank you for telling her story.
I hope more people check it out. It was among my top 10 games of that year. Barely just eking out games like, I think, Hat in Time. So it's definitely worth checking out.
And then, of course, Mass Effect. I mean, you can't go wrong with Mass Effect. I mean, that's good stuff.
I mean, if you like shooters and sci-fi, Mass Effect is probably up your alley if you haven't played it.
Just a space opera. You gotta, if you like Star Trek, Star Wars, things like that, like you gotta experience it, of course. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's see. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Also over at rhymeswithasia.com. The video version of this show goes up on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel. As far as podcast services, we are live on podcast services. So go check us out on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Spotify isn't a big fan of our critical tracks, so unfortunately we can't be there as far as their terms of service. Our apologies, we tried. But you can find the podcast feed over on anondino.squarespace.com. That's Joe's site there for Anonymous Dinosaur, along with your other podcasts, including Smasterpieces.
Yeah, which is a really fun show. If you enjoy hearing people talk about video games and, to a certain degree, video game soundtracks, I'd check it out.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback for us or any soundtracks that you'd like us to cover, you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST. And that's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, originalsoundchat@gmail.com. Let's play things out with a remix of a song from Mass Effect. When I did my show, Tempo Control, probably 3 years ago or so at this point, I picked this one, and it doesn't change. Like, this is such a great song, because this is one of the ones where, like, we kind of really dove in on that show that I did back then. But this one is Nova Siberia, and it comes from Big Giant Circles over on OC Remix.
A remix legend, by the way.
Jimmy Henson. Yeah, so he's very, very talented. He kind of beefs up the song Noveria from that ice world in Mass Effect and just gives it more weight, and it's just more mechanical. And I love it. It's a great listen. So I hope you get to listen to it on the way out. You can find Joe on Twitter at @TheDobaga. Again, I'm at Pete Speakeasy. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Original Soundchat. Take care.